It has often been remarked, although it is a fact, but no means commonly known, that the name given to children at baptismal font joined to their family or surnames, and added to titles which may be bestowed upon them in after life, often point out many circumstances events which may befall the parties upon whom such names have been bestowed, and that if their parents had paid more attention to this part of astrological divination, those names which were unlucky might, by due care and attention, have been avoided, while those of a more fortunate description might have been selected for their children, and have been rendered even still more valuable and fortunate, by being conjoined with others of a like nature. In order that our viewers may have a clearer insight into this branch of fortune-telling, and which appears to have been strangely neglected by modern practitioners, we shall lay before them a few specimens of this admirable system of discovering the events of our checkered existence, and from a study of which they will readily learn how to avoid bestowing on their children such as are a malignant nature, and, at the same time, perceive how the secret influence of the stars that presided at our birth, act in the minutest manner, even to the giving of that name at our baptism, which oftentimes explains to the bearer of it, if he could then but know it, those events which will assuredly befall him in the course of his life. Of the antiquity of this science it is scarcely necessary to speak. It may however be as well to remark, that it was formerly in the highest repute among the astrologers of the early ages, and even some of our ancient writers have not disdained to advocate its cause. One of these, the celebrated Camden, has in his Remains bequeathed to the world an excellent treatise on the subject. He refers the origin of this invention to the times of Moses, and conceives that it might have had some share in the mystical tradition afterward called Kabbalah, communicated by that divine lawgiver to the chosen 70. That this art was practiced by the ancient Egyptians there cannot be a doubt, as there are even now remaining several of the names of the Egyptian monarchs which have been transposed and fully point out the principal events of their lives. The Greeks also practiced the art, but we do not find any examples among the Romans, which is somewhat surprising, as their seers, astrologers, and sibyls practiced almost every species of divination. Among modern nations, the French appear to have distinguished themselves for their proficiency in it, and which, Camden says, they exceedingly admire and celebrate for the deep antiquity and mystical meaning thereof. Indeed, to such a height did that nation carry the practice of this art in the early ages, that there were kept lists of lucky and unlucky names, and particular care was taken, when bestowing a name on a child, that such only should be given as could, by transposition, be formed into some fortunate signification. But this often failed, for even those very names, when transposed, contained this fortunate signification, yet, by a second transposition, sometimes quite the contrary would be indicated and thus, foil those, who would have foiled the stars. Having thus introduced this subject to our viewers, and fully proved its antiquity, it only remains for us to lay before them such specimens of the art as may enable them to practice upon their own names, and by so doing become acquainted with that principal occurrence of their lives, which may be for their future good or evil, and if the latter, by possessing such foreknowledge, by caution and good conduct on their parts, alleviate or prevent its effects. We shall take these instances from the names of well-known characters, by which it will be instantly seen how immediate is the connection between the name of the party and the principal events of their lives. And first with the name of Bonaparte, which is perhaps the most complete specimen of the art we could possibly lay before our viewers, and if properly transposed fully shows in each transposition the character of the man, and points out that unfortunate occurrence in his life, which ultimately proved his ruin thus. Napoleon Bonaparte. No, appear not on Elba. In the name of Wellington we find his future glory parts. Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington. Let well-foiled Gaul secure thy renown. And the like in that of Nelson, thus. Horatio Nelson. Honor est a Nilo, which in English means, honor is to be found at the Nile. In the name of Sir Francis Burdett we find, frantic disturbers, which fully prophesies the busy scenes of the popular riot and disturbance in which he would be engaged. In the name of the late lamented Princess Charlotte, we have another proof of the infallibility of this art, thus. Princess Charlotte Augusta of Wales. Her august race is lost, O fatal news. The following anagram on James VI of Scotland, fully proves that his future fortune was predicted at his baptism, thus. Charles James Stuart claims Arthur's seat, and accordingly, on the death of Queen Elizabeth, he became James I of England, and thereby possessed the throne which the name given him at his birth plainly foretold. The above will be sufficient to instruct our viewers in this very entertaining and infallible mode of discovering future events. It may be necessary to observe, that some names will not form into separate words without the addition or subtraction of one or more letters, This is always allowable. For instance, K may be substituted for C, I for J, V for U, and vice versa. These specimens will be sufficient to prove the infallibility of this art, and many of our viewers will find, if they transpose the letters of their own names after the same fashion, that their future good or ill fortune will be thereby plainly pointed out.